Hello everyone, welcome to Hong Kong Ghost Files. This episode is a response to a request from one of our viewers. They wanted to hear about a ghost story from one particular place in Hong Kong, Sha Tin City One. On the surface, this housing estate looks lively and prosperous, and it has been home to countless families. But because of one tragic incident from the past, it has also become one of the most famous urban legends in the city. If other viewers would like me to share ghost stories from different places around Asia, feel free to leave me a comment and let me know. On September 1st, 1989, Hong Kong's famous TV host Paul Chung suddenly fell from a high floor and died in City One. At the time, the news was reported everywhere and shocked the entire city. The cause of his death, however, has always been debated. Some said he was burdened by gambling debts and chose to end his own life. Some believed he accidentally fell while drunk, while others whispered that gangsters were involved, forcing him to the edge before pushing him down. The truth remains a mystery to this day. Even more unsettling, after Paul's death, stories of ghostly encounters began to spread. In one case, while a television program was being recorded in the studio, a cameraman accidentally captured a familiar figure. It was Paul Chung himself. The incident became widely known in the industry as the TV studio ghost shadow case. In fact, I already shared this story in detail back in episode 1 of Hong Kong Haunted Studio. If you're interested, you can go back and check it out. But today's story takes place in another place deeply connected to Paul's Chung, the home he once lived in, inside Sha Tin City One. A few years later, another main character entered the story. His name was Mr. Lee, a primary school teacher, known for his upright and steady personality. With housing prices and rents in Hong Kong being so high, he had long been searching for a decent but affordable place to live. When an agent introduced him to a flat that was $2,000 cheaper than the market price, he thought he had found a bargain. Although the agent vaguely mentioned that something had happened in this flat before, Mr. Lee paid little attention. He believed that as a man of honesty and integrity, with the righteous aura of a teacher, he wouldn't so easily run into anything supernatural. With this kind of wishful thinking, Mr. Lee moved into the unit that would later be called a haunted flat. And in the moment when the door lock clicked shut, he had no idea that he had just stepped into a story where the shadows of the past had never truly faded. When Mr. Lee first moved into his new flat, his mood was relaxed and even a little cheerful. Even though the flat was $2,000 cheaper than the market price, the interior wasn't old or run down, the space was decent. For a single man, it was more than enough. His daily routine was simple and regular. After school, he graded homework, prepared lessons, and on his way home, he always stopped by the convenience store downstairs to buy 2 cans of beer and a packet of peanuts. Back at home, he would turn on the TV, drink and snack, treating it as a small comfort after a long day of work. During the first week, everything was peaceful. He even felt secretly relieved, thinking that the haunted flat rumors might have been nonsense after all. But by the second week, he started to notice subtle changes. One night, as usual, he finished his peanuts and beer. Newspapers and empty cans were left scattered across the coffee table. Too tired to clean up, he went straight to bed. The next morning, when he walked out into the living room, he froze. The table was spotless. The beer cans had been neatly placed in the trash, and the newspapers stacked tidily in the corner of the kitchen. Did I clean it up myself and just forget? Mr. Lee wondered. It was strange, but as a teacher, reason guided him. He forced himself to explain it as nothing more than a lapse of memory. However, the same thing happened again a few days later. Determined to test it, he deliberately left the cans and newspapers in complete disarray, making sure he didn't touch them. Yet the following morning, everything was once again perfectly cleaned. This time, a chill ran through him that he couldn't explain away. Besides me, is there someone else living here? The thought flashed through his mind, sending a cold shiver down his back. He tried to comfort himself. Maybe he was just too tired, maybe the beer made him forget. Or perhaps the flat had odd drafts, shifting things around during the night. But the idea felt flimsy. The place wasn't messy at all. It was organized, as if someone had carefully tidied up for him. What truly convinced him that something wasn't right happened one ordinary evening. Sitting at the coffee table with his beers, he switched on the television, hoping to relax. The program showing was the Miss Hong Kong beauty pageant. Mr. Lee stiffened. He had already seen this exact broadcast several times. No matter what time he came home, whenever he turned on the TV, it was always the same show. "This is way too much of a coincidence," he muttered, his finger already moving to change the channel. In the next instant, the camera angle on the television suddenly shifted. The camera slowly zoomed in from the lively Miss Hong Kong stage to the host. The lights were dazzling, the applause deafening, but Mr. Lee froze. The host on the television screen was none other than Paul Chung. At first, Mr. Lee thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. After all, Chung had been dead for years. How could he still be hosting a show? But as the camera lingered, it was clear. Chung was no longer looking at the audience. He was staring directly at Mr. Lee, sitting in front of the television. In that instant, every hair on Mr. Lee's body stood on end. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it would burst. Even if the show was just an old rerun, the host's gaze should have been fixed on the audience, not locking eyes with him through the screen. Then came something even more terrifying. Chung's lips began to move, and a voice followed, not the scripted lines of the program, but a desperate, urgent cry. "I didn't kill myself. I was forced. Please help me, call the police." Mr. Lee screamed, scrambling to his bedroom, slamming the door shut and diving under the covers, trembling uncontrollably. He squeezed his eyes shut, whispering over and over, "It's just an illusion, just a hallucination. I drank too much." But the voice lingered in his ears. Chung's low, hoarse pleas seemed to echo from the television in the living room. No longer an illusion, but clear, undeniable human speech. "This time, I really heard him," Mr. Lee muttered, his forehead drenched in sweat. He realized now that he was not alone in this flat. Something else was sharing the space with him, unseen but ever present, watching every breath and every heartbeat. Then, in a burst of strange courage, Mr. Lee clenched his teeth and whispered into the darkness, "If you really were killed, then tell me who did it. I'm going to sleep now. You write it down yourself." His voice trembled, but carried a kind of reckless boldness. If there truly was a ghost here, he might as well confront it and see if it would answer. With this unsettling resolve, Mr. Lee finally forced his eyes shut, his whole body rigid as he endured until morning. When daylight filtered through the curtains, he reluctantly opened his eyes. The whole night had been spent in fear and tension. The first thing he did was glance toward the living room, hoping his desperate words, "Tell me who killed you," had been nothing more than drunken nonsense. But as he stepped into the room, he froze. On the coffee table lay 2 sheets of paper. The handwriting was neat, cold, deliberate. 2 names, each followed by a phone number, and at the bottom, a line written so clearly it burned into his eyes. "I was murdered. Call the police." Mr. Lee's fingers shook, his chest tight as if something was crushing it, his breath coming in short gasps. He knew these words were not written by him. The handwriting was completely different, and the papers were laid out so neatly, it was as if they had been deliberately left for him to find. "So, he really answered me," Mr. Lee whispered, his mind reeling. What he had said in defiance last night had been answered. All the fear and doubt he had held back now solidified into a heavy burden. Mr. Lee felt certain Chung's spirit truly wanted him to seek justice, or else he would never have risked leaving behind names and numbers. Summoning what courage he had left, Mr. Lee grabbed the papers and went to the police station, explaining everything to the officer on duty. But all he received in return was an awkward, dismissive smile. "Sir, maybe you're under too much stress? Ghost stories aren't exactly something we can handle," the officer said lightly, sliding the papers back to him. Some nearby even smirked, clearly not taking him seriously. Mr. Lee was desperate. He kept insisting that he was a teacher, a professional, and would never fabricate something so absurd. He argued until his mouth went dry, but the officers still refused to file a report. In despair, he turned to another path, seeking help from a television station. After all, years ago people had already claimed to see Paul Chung's ghost during a studio recording. Surely a production team would at least be willing to listen. And indeed, when he handed the papers to a producer, the man looked skeptical at first. But when he saw the clearly written names and phone numbers, his expression slowly turned serious. The team used their internal contacts to check, and to their shock, they discovered that one of the numbers truly belonged to a finance company. The room fell silent. Everyone looked at one another. Nobody was laughing now. Mr. Lee's eyes were bloodshot, his voice shaking. "You believe it now, don't you? He wasn't lying. He really was murdered." Yet even with the phone number confirmed, the production team was powerless. The case was too sensitive, and without solid evidence, no one dared to dig deeper. In the end, the information was quietly buried, treated as if it had never existed. For Mr. Lee, that sense of helplessness was worse than any supernatural encounter. He finally understood. Even if the truth came out, it didn't mean anyone would take responsibility. After carrying the papers to both the police and the TV station, Mr. Lee's mental state began to crumble. Every night when he came home, the air felt heavy, as though another presence was lurking in the corners, silently watching him. The television screen became his greatest fear. Even when it was turned off, the dark reflective surface showed his outline, and sometimes a white shadow flickered across it, keeping him awake through the night. After a week of sleepless nights and constant dread, he made his decision. He would move out. On the day he left, Mr. Lee sat in the living room one final time, staring at the television. He whispered softly, "I've done all I could. I went to the police. I went to the TV station. No one is willing to help you. If debts and grudges truly belong to those who caused them, I hope the next person can do what I couldn't." With that, he bowed deeply, switched off the power, and dragged his suitcase to the door. The corridor outside was empty, the lights dim and yellow. Mr. Lee knew, in his heart, that he would never have any ties with this flat again. But the story did not end with his departure. It is said that after Mr. Lee moved out, the unit welcomed new tenants. For the first few days, everything was calm. Then complaints began. The television would often switch on by itself, always showing the Miss Hong Kong pageant. Some even claimed that in the middle of the night, they would wake to find the living room spotless, every item neatly arranged, as though an invisible pair of hands had quietly tidied up the place. These stories spread from one person to another, until eventually the flat on that particular floor of Block 43 became known as the most haunted unit in City One. Whenever residents chatted, they would always mention Paul Chung, and they would always bring up the teacher who once lived there, only to move out in fear. Many years later, Mr. Lee would still occasionally recall what he had gone through. He remembered clearly the voice he had heard that night, echoing in his ears as if it had happened only yesterday. "I didn't kill myself. I was murdered." That cry, even after he had long left the place, never faded from his mind.